Just starting this session. Dr. Hidalgo, you will make presentation, right? Instead of the sharing the pre-recorded one, right?
Hello.
Oh, you will. Yeah.
Yeah, I upload the presentation.
Oh, just before this.
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's pre-recorded one. Sorry.
Yes.
Let me check that. Let me see. Thank you for the cooperation. Oh, okay. Let me see. Sorry, guys, I have to download the Dr. Hidalgo's pre-recorded presentation, so please wait a second. And here. Good evening. I will talk about the 50-minute city designed by the community. Okay.
As a concept.
Okay. Let me check that. And Dr. Hidalgo, is this the one you uploaded?
6.5 billion.
Can you hear the sound?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Great. So, sorry. Sorry for confusing things. And thank you for coming to this session. And this webinar is about titled Back to the Field, Community Design After COVID-19. This room is titled Nearby Placemaking After COVID-19. And my name is Naomi Uchida. I will be the moderator for this session. And I am a professor at the Saitama University in Japan. And the university is located in the Tokyo metropolitan area. So I am living in Tokyo, and unfortunately now we are going through the worst surge of COVID-19 ever. So the pandemic is still not over, but anyway. So I'm going to introduce the presenters for this session. We have three wonderful presenters. When I introduce you, please say hi to all of them to let them know who will be the presenter. So the first one is Professor Kinoshita. He's a professor of Otsuma University in Japan. Could you say hi to them? Hi.
Hello,
to the
everyone.
audience.
Yeah,
Hi.
nice to meet you. Yeah, good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kinoshita. And the second presenter is Miss Maran.
Tanakoto katoa, ko Boopsie tokuingawa. Hello, everyone. I'm Boopsie presenting from New Zealand.
Thank you. Is that the native language in New Zealand, right? Thank you. That's sounds very cute. And the third presenter is Dr. Hidalgo.
Hello to everyone. Thank you. I'm sorry for the confusion about the recording. I'm sorry because I had some problems on uploading that. But I'm really glad to be here, and I hope everything, the presentation, we can discuss about after that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I forgot to introduce you guys what you are doing. Professor Kinoshita is a professor at the Otsuma University, and Miss Maran is the founder and the director of Places for Good in New Zealand. And Dr. Hidalgo is academic director at the School of Architecture at the UEES in Ecuador. So if you want to know more detail about the presenters, please check the program. You already have the one, I think. So before going into the presentations, I'm explaining how this session works. I will share the all three pre-recorded 10 minutes presentations first. And after the three presentations, we will have a Q&A session. And I am very happy to accept questions or comments from the audience and also from presenters. If you have any question or comments, please use the chat function. Please post them in the chat. And please specify the question or the comments is to whom. You can say that, to all, but anyway, please specify that. So in total, this session will be 60 minutes. And I just remind you, this session is also being recorded, and please mute your microphone when you are not asking or answering questions. So, and this session is about the placemaking. And placemaking is not only about the physical improvement or using the public spaces, it's also a collective and collaborative process. And the first presentation and the second presentation is pretty much about the placemaking, like having parklet, those kind of things. And the third presentation is more about 15 minutes neighborhood. But I guess the 15 minutes neighborhood also needs the placemaking efforts. So now let's start the first presentation by Professor Kinoshita. And I will share the data.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isami Kinoshita. This time I'll give the presentation about the restricting of placemaking at the site where I'm living at the local area in Shizuoka City near Mount Fuji. But first, to think about the definition of placemaking. Usually we are focusing on public space. But Kitaro Nishida's description about a place, he described the time and space, the field rises above consciousness through the given experience. In Japan, the public space is not so enough. And I got an idea for private space, open to public. For instance, this project, which happened in 2005 at a site in Kogane town in Matsudo City. This house owner offered his carport place to make small pocket park. This site is a private site, and all construction fee was paid by him. Why he did is that he had an idea from the UW's design and build he could know. At that time, 2003, of the collaboration with Jeff Howe on the Global Classroom with Chiba University and the University of Washington. Going back to Kambara in Shizuoka City, the house I bought 4 years ago for the preservation introduced by my friend. And I decided to buy for my retirement and to move here. While I lived here, I felt time and place, like Kitaro Nishida told. However, every year, all the traditional houses were demolished. So it is important to share the meaning of the preservation of all the traditional houses by the usage of providing the experience of traditional houses. And then we organize a committee cafe inviting local people. And then at the first cafe, we made a workshop to discuss about the usage of this house. But this event was shocking for my wife. She told, this is our house. Why people are talking about how to use? This is our house. And that is so shocking for my wife. It took time to change the idea of my wife. But it's another story. And then, after that, so on monthly, the committee cafe was held by the collaboration with the local students organization. Sometimes event together, and a concert and lecture, workshop, and so on. And the seasonal events of New Year, rice cake workshop, a traditional event we organize. So to do at inside the house, now it's very rare to see this kind. People are very much enjoy. Under COVID-19, no more cafe and event. Stay home, social distance support, and restricted many opportunities for people's communication. At home, we decided to do again rice cake workshop only by my family on New Year. New Year, the family gathered. My son came back, and he, of course, took part in the mochi rice cake workshop. For him, for the first time to do it. So it's also a nice time to share the experience and communicate with the family members. Last summer, this event collaborating with the theater group, the ghost story on the summer night were held for 8 nights. One night, 3 times for limited guests. Under COVID-19, it was very challenging. At my house, though the audience are very few, but the communication between the performer and the guests were very intimate. We could know each other close relationship we could organize. And the new encounter led to the next project using the place. For instance, the new encounter with Mr. Kubota, whom I met at the Ghost Story event, when he saw the garden, and we got an idea to make to organize a Belgian beer weekend, because he knows well about Belgian beer, and with his lecture about Belgian beer and drink and party to the guests only limited to 10 people. So we know German beer Oktoberfest, but we don't know much about the Belgian beer weekend. This time the guests enjoyed very much, and they could know that so many different types of the Belgian beer is given. And each bottle has its own glass and coaster. Such things we shared each other with the taste of the beer. It was a nice beer party. Under COVID-19, and live streaming would be a good tools. to share the talking. Ryo Yamazaki, Shin Aiba, Masataka Baba, who are the most popular community designer at today's scene. When they visited my house, taking this chance, we organized a talk session, sending a live stream by YouTube. And from this talking, we discussed about the post-COVID-19 for sustainable community design. And we realized importance, or could notice the keyword texon and the new word texon, and that means the appropriate sparseness. So the audience was sparse, of course, at that place, but sending by stream, YouTube, and the internet covered to be shared beyond the place and time. And also other thing to rethink of placemaking is home, family. So COVID-19 forced me to stay at home, which might be stressful for my wife. But thinking of housework I will have to do, and so that kind of relationship changed. And then, so I gradually supporting my wife's bread baking. And sometimes we went to Marche, held on the old house cafe of our network. This. To conclude my presentation, referring Yujiro Nakamura's essay about the logic of place and common sense, he integrated the idea of the place and Kitaro Nishida's successor Kiyoshi Miki's creative imagination. That's a very inspiring essay. And I made this chart. So from private space, open to common, and connecting through the network, and the similar common sense of the all the house and the house cafe and so on. And also now, of course, internet, so like the public connection. Like this, so it was a process, rethinking of people's relationship of family members, of the neighbors, the community, and the network. This process could be the process for creative imagination and sharing common sense through the place. That is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kinoshita. And so Q&A session will come after 3 presentations. So I will share the next one. So it's by Ms. Maran. Meet people were there. Progress a tool for community engagement.
Makoto, Tanakoto, Tanatato Katoa, Kobupsi Tokuingawa, Itupumai Ho, Ki Los Angeles, Enari, Tamiki Makoto, Toku, Tulanga Waiwai, Inaine. Hello everyone, my name is Boopsy. I'm from LA, but I've been living in Auckland for the last 15 years. And I'm really happy to be here today. And thank you for having me in your workshop series. So let's get started kind of with a thought. I'd like you all to imagine and picture using parklets as a new approach to participatory design and community engagement. As we think about community design after COVID and moving back into the field, I would like to show you why Parklet should be a part of your community engaged design practice toolkit, and how intermittently filling streets with people instead of cars can be an effective tool for community outreach. What is a parklet? It is what happens when you transform car storage into activated, people-friendly spaces to share. This image at your top left is taken from the Palmerston North Design Guide initiated by the city. While you may have seen car parks used to simply widen a narrow footpath, some of you may also have noticed them being used for outdoor dining. Here, this lower image was taken from 5 years ago at a Long Beach cafe that was pre-COVID and had chosen to prioritize additional seating and dining over storefront car parking. This is Places for Good's very first parklet. It was an effort to support a community-led design project at which the locals were trying to reclaim government-owned land that was currently a liquor store to be back turned into a park or a civic square, which was its intended purpose upon purchase in 2006. So Places for Good set this up as a tool to gather community voice and share the place story of this site-specific intervention. The community was hoping that rather than a liquor store, which today still stands, the site would be used for the intention at which the city had purchased the land over 15 years ago, a civic open space. Local board members and parliamentary candidates all sat in the seat in the mock Ponsonby Park, and it was placed directly out front of the site. It was a tactical intervention to explore the potential of an open public space where anyone could sit and connect without having to buy a coffee. Passersby, locals, and tourists relaxed, reset, and felt the point of what could be. We are not speaking to people anymore. Data only seemingly reflects car movements rather than the human experience. Lots of quantitative data collected from a Metro count pneumatic tube traffic counter, invented to collect car axle information on the roads. In Auckland, you might drive over these tools 6 times a day, but only be able to provide your versions of safety concerns to an actual person, maybe once in your life. How are we counting feet? How are we counting these people? Collecting their community narratives, we need relationship-based communication, and we need to meet people who use the spaces in the areas they live, work, and play. In your typical approach to public input, this is the design we have currently in Auckland for people to be heard. And emotion will immediately become the driver of understanding and decision-making. You can only reach these rooms if you have the correct email to ask permission. Even more difficult is understanding if your community-led initiative is in the planning committee, the governing body committee, or climate change committee. And you have to kind of clear your calendar for 3 months ahead, just in case you might have other commitments on a Tuesday or Thursday, starting from 10 a.m. Then we have the other option of typical approaches to contribute to decision-making. Here on the left, you have a public community hall meeting. Do you find this format to be inclusive? Why do we expect people to feel comfortable, honest, and calm in a room where 100 people face a stage at which you must speak on a microphone? How is your everyday person meant to navigate these rooms? Let's also talk about the standard consultation documents. The average person most likely requires supplementary instructions on working through those diagrams on the bottom right. And these are ways the general public are meant to digest public policy and the civil changes that are happening in their personal neighborhoods. Parklets allow for us to meet people where they are. Here you can see the women in urbanism of Aotearoa. They're sharing, creating a safe place for people to be heard. They are allowing an opportunity for humans to sit, feel, observe, and garner that shared understanding of what the problem is, right here, right now. And as they pass by, they're meeting them where they're at. Today, we have a lack of trust in the government from the community being served. But the trust can be built and fostered through parklet interactions. On site, in real time, they become known, reliable sources for project information and familiar faces. Because we are working at the speed of trust, and people can celebrate on-site advocacy for special initiatives. Their value is in the parklet's ability to receive contextualized real-time feedback in a place where your local leader might stumble upon your local champion. And so I'm in the center there, facilitating, and to my left is Gabriel, who was trying to add a cycleway through that street, and the local council member, Kipakum, stumbled upon it and really, again, felt the point of what it's like to not have such a car-dominated space. It is important to have a strategic spot. A parklet can become an effective tool for steady and consistent two-way communication. People lost in a sea of emails are now welcomed into a space like a parklet. You can see how in the context, it presents that governments are allowing the community the opportunity to be heard, and you are on site to exchange stories and concern and facts in that place, about the place and in it. This particular parklet in front of Auckland Transport's regional transport service hub was created as an opportunity to model the effectiveness of a parklet as a tool for human connection. Here we got permission from the developer and activations manager. We decorated, we programmed. We also shared better practices for human engagement, comfortable seating, lively and joyful design. Timing, pre-planning, and programming. The specific parklet was used as a tool to address safer routes to and from school. Here we connected with artists and shared games, furniture, and the seating was built on site at this intermediate school with the students a few days before the actual event, which was a parking day a few years before COVID. But building this seating and placing it all together in an underutilized parking spot allowed families and students to have a deeper understanding and the concept of not only parking day, but how kids are coming to and from school and really showing them active modes and just bringing everyone together outdoors in a public space to discuss transport and traffic, really. And when you engage with local schools and community groups for the buy-in, you have a stronger community connection and huge parts of quality community engaged design processes. And how do you help people feel your point? An active parklet is definitely an effective parklet. You entice people, you distract, you draw in, you welcome entertainment and playfulness. And you can see like hula hooping, that's some nice social distancing, but also just if people are walking by, it's a nice place to have a bit of music, or we had live painting in our parklets, or just even if it's just a bit of greenery as people are walking around. If you're in a lockdown still, it's just a nice break in the routine. Here in Point Chevalier, which is a suburb of Auckland, students and families shared what mode of transports they used to arrive to a street party that the school put on and the local government. It's a good example of when disrupting streets and changing the layouts and activating your outdoor space. You can include new innovative ways for people to visually see they are heard. So you really immediately know that most people did cycling and walking to get to the event. How did you come today? And if you were to reuse this data and take it to a public meeting, people engaged in that parklet, that spot collection of data, and it's really obvious what the most common use of travel was. So you need to really remember what you are there to achieve above all else in a parklet: a connection to the human experience in a place where people are able to feel your point, and you are there to hear theirs in their place when you guys are all back in the field. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And okay, let's move on to the third one. It's by Dr. Hidalgo, the 15-minute city designed by the community, neighborhood centralities in informal settlement.
Good evening. I will talk about the 50-minute city designed by the community, neighborhood centralities in informal segments, the importance of public space. It is important that every city achieve 11 sustainable cities and communities that guarantee access to safe and affordable housing and improvement of marginal segments. It is also include investing in public transportation and creating green public areas and improving urban planning and management in a way that is participatory and inclusive. As a general information, 4.5 billion people, 55% of the world's population live in cities. By 2050, the urban population is expected to reach 6.5 billion. Cities occupy only 3% of the earth, but represent 60 to 80% of energy consumption. An estimated of 828 million people live in slums. On March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization classified COVID-19 as a pandemic. Problems in Latin American cities such as overcrowding in vulnerable sectors in formal segments, lack of basic services in rural and peri-urban areas, lack of public spaces to maintain social distancing in cities. So it is important, there is a need to improve and increase public space in cities in order to create a more inclusive and healthy cities. A public space refers to an area that is open and accessible to all people, regardless of their gender, race, ethnicity, age, or socioeconomic status. These are public gathering spaces, such as squares and parks. Connecting spaces, such as sidewalks and streets, are also considered public spaces. The case I will talk about is located in the country of Ecuador, that has a 63% of urban population, 37% of rural population. According to Constitution 2008 in Ecuador, Article 31 mentions that people have the right to full enjoyment of the city and its public space, under the principle of sustainability, social justice, respect for different urban culture and balance between urban and rural. As a concept, the city of 50 minutes, the health crisis of COVID-19 resurfaced the theory of cities, everything in 15 minutes, cycling and walking, by the architect and professor at the Sorbonne University, Carlos Moreno. In informal segments, neighborhood centralities are determined by users, consider the proximity and convenience of common services according to the study case Montesinaí, an informal segment in legalization process, located on the outskirts northwest of the city of Guayaquil in Ecuador. What differs from formal neighborhood centralities, it is that the informal ones lack of legality, are located in segments outside cities. Buildings are outside the safety regulations in vulnerable areas, lack basic services and infrastructure, and grow without planning. Moreover, since the growth has been organic, identity is vital in these sectors. The formal neighborhood centers start and develop based on the user's needs. We want to see an example of the case. The case is located in the northwestern part of Guayaquil, has 800 hectares of territory, and the socio-economic level is one of the most vulnerable sectors, lack of legality, and starts at 2000-2002. We see these two maps. At my left hand, 2011 has 13,076 housing, compared to 2015, that increased to 27,369. So this is the segment, it's growing very fast. If we compare these two maps, 2017, we have a total housing 25,784, whereas in 2021, we have 27,633. So this segment is growing so fast. We can see the land use here, and the orange parts of the segment are vulnerable areas. And we have some facilities such as schools and health centers. And this is a study done by architect Carlos Velasco, part of the team, on space centers, where we start to locate the urban centralities, which are in the red lines, the main streets, basically. So here we point out the urban centralities. We can see some photos underneath, and we search that the neighborhood centralities has around 400 meters radius of use to the furthest point. This is a condition, like a general condition of each neighborhood centrality. As an example of public space through community participation process before the pandemic, this is a project done in 2018 by 2 universities, 10 enterprising students from both universities and professors from both universities. And the process was to do community participation through the design until the construction process. So the community was the main actor of this process. At this point, it started to be like the main site of the neighborhood Monte Lindo in Monte Sinai. Now, during the pandemic, it is at a vaccine point for the community. So what alternatives do you have to face current challenging at the local level? To do these communal facilities in Monte Sinai, for example, to promote more communal spaces, public spaces, sports centers, parks, of course, with sanitation areas, like to do like a network of this kind of facilities, and also to improve neighborhood centralities as starting point of a change. Considering designing a public space for kids, like Guillermo Peñalosa architect mentioned, if you design a communal a public space for kids, you're designing the city for everyone. So public space in times of the pandemic, there is a need to improve public space in informal segments, starting with the local centralities. Public spaces become high points for the cities. It is necessary that the public space is designed to maintain social distance. The public space serves as a space for business expansion, study the possibility of pedestrian of the streets to increase public spaces. It could be temporary, not permanent. It is necessary that basic infrastructure such as water station, sanitation equipment are in public spaces. As a conclusion, neighborhood centralities is a starting point for the improvement of a sector, the beginning of a change. The place represents the residents, the identity, where various activities generate a collective memory. The urban growth of a city is accompanied by the development of neighborhood centers, which is extremely important to improve them through citizen participation process that allows the empowerment of inhabitants. It is necessary to engage the centrality as a concept of the city of 15 minutes. Urban consultant Carlos Moreno referred to improving the centralities, providing the quality of life, different activities can be carried out. So in Monte Sinai, the neighborhood centralities could be the starting point of a change. Thank you.
Thank you. So these are the all presentations in this session. And please use the chat function to give the questions or comments to the presenters. So, but so far I didn't see any of that. So maybe each presenters make some comments or questions to the other presenters. Is that okay? Oh, there's one question. Where can I find the paper for the 15-minute city? I think I believe it's to the Dr. Hidalgo. So after answering this question, maybe please give us the each presenters giving some comments or questions to the other presenters. Is it okay? So Dr. Hidalgo, can you answer to the question?
Yes, now we are working on the paper. What I present is like the first part of the research we are doing. We're working on an atlas of for this case, but I can leave my my Gmail. So when we had this publication, I can send it to him.
Okay, thanks. That will be helpful. And I'm also interested in that. So please send me that when you finish the paper. So let's see. Each presenter, can you give us a comment or questions to other presenters? So Professor Kinoshita, do you have any comments or questions to the other presenters?
Okay, thank you for a nice, good presentation. To first, to Miss Marang, Parklet use it's getting popular in the world, and in Japan, so the road is not so wide. And we don't have so many parklets, yeah. But to use the street, yeah. Of course, going back to the old time, so children were playing on the street, people are chatting, and this street is a very important place to connect the people of the neighbors communication. So, but now, so under motorization, the car dominated the streets. Yeah. And under COVID-19, more stay home and going to public space. Many people, I'm now living in countryside. So car, basic way of the transport, car. And on the street became no place for people meeting. Yeah, that's it. So then I have a question. So in Auckland, so that is such a kind of project needed some kind of agreement or the such a, like common sense with, as I told with the authority as administration and the neighbor of the community. How did you organize such kind of such consensus building with that to use place to collect?
Well, with those parklets, they're kind of in the gray area. So legally, before I was working for Auckland Transport, I was doing it just for community without permission. And I actually prefer doing it without legal permission because then it's more disruptive and it's more empowering for community because they can just do it and they feel like they can do it. And so as long as you use light materials, the worst thing the government can tell you to do is to take it away. So that's why you use the cones and the bunting and the outdoor furniture that folds. It's never been done where someone's been told to leave, but in particular for the very first parklet, that was dangerous because it was so robust. So if they had actually made me leave, I would have to find 10 adults and a truck to remove that cladding and that staging, but it also made it more effective because people could sit in it in the road, and that was quite a busy road. But we did have members of parliament that sat in it and still remember me and my face as part of that project to support more open public space. But the Generation Zero group once did a parklet that was permitted, but it didn't have the same disruptive effect for politicians. So you kind of want it to be in that gray area. So all I do usually is I have a garage full of materials. Someone will say, we want more bike parking in an area. Can we borrow your seating? And they'll sit in it and they'll do the discussion. So I've done about 10 to 15 samples. And from now on, we're using it more to help children share their stories with their parents on why they rather walk and cycle to school, because often in pickup and drop off, we're having problems with too many cars. That's our biggest thing causing traffic is kids going to and from school. So we've shifted from using the parklet as a advocacy space for public space to an advocacy space, just whatever your cause is. It's good because people come to you Because often if you have a table at a library or trying to teach people about a community topic, it's not as obvious when you're in the middle of the road. It's really helpful because people will walk up to you and ask, what's going on here? And then that's your chance to share your issue. Does that make sense?
Thank you. It's very interesting. And more one question is okay. So from the picture after COVID, so for such a placemaking, so people don't wear the mask, yeah. So in Japan, it is incredible. So as I have shown, we need a mask and such gathering. Also now in the such a claiming society, if people watch such talking without mask, the claim will come. But in New Zealand, you don't have such kind of thing.
Yeah, so in New Zealand, that big parklet with the hula hooper and stuff was between the two lockdowns, and that we had to change the date many times because we were in the lockdown and we wanted to do that representation of where a cycleway could be. And I think we're still, even though we have no cases of COVID, we still as a society, which people in America can't believe, we're wearing masks on buses. So we're wearing masks on buses, trains and planes and ferries, but out in public, only when we're at different levels. And right now we're at a low level, level 1, so we don't have to wear it out in public and practice social distancing. But it was a big deal to be in that parklet. But I think also we're modeling how much space you can have. So even as we go past and we get vaccinated and we are in mask, you can still be social. And especially like you're giving that extra space. So if people are walking, like in Melbourne and Sydney, be really good because people must miss live music and they must miss theater, right? You could do theater in a parklet without a mask because you'll be so far, close the roads, which they did in New York. So I think, well, one thing our prime minister said was that we're not a mask wearing society like Japan and China, where it's obvious and it's natural and you're like everyone else. Here, it is that opportunity. If you're still learning how to get everyone to wear a mask, at least you can be enjoying each other safely at a distance because of these parklets. I feel like people really yearn that connection, and whether or not it's a 2-meter distance without a mask or walking past each other with mask is up to each city. But yeah, definitely parklets created that space, but that was in between, that was in COVID, that parklet where we're all was between the 2 lockdowns. So yeah, it shows how you can make space if you choose to.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. There is a question in the chat box, and so sorry for interruption. And so there's a question to the Professor Kinoshita. You can see the chat, and the connection among the people at the event led to the next. What important factors moved these people to continue the work? That's the question to, I believe, to the Professor Kinoshita.
Okay, so now it's a good question. So, of course, the event is limited to few people and the guests. Yeah, such a place is a very few people, and the numbers of the participants is no problem. I could understand from the intimate communication to get an idea. Also, that might be the kind of creative imagination. And so this produce the next event. And on the process, we can chat by internet, communicate by email, and then to more to plan the project. And so that this time I wanted to share such my experience under COVID or the after COVID-19. So such a place. Sometimes the event was so we are very much keen the numbers of the participants, but the numbers is not problem. It's the quality of the communication to produce something. Even it's a kind of placemaking to use. Is it okay? That is my answer. It's a good question.
Yeah, small gathering works, I think. And important thing is to have the people who have the motivation to join in some certain to tackle to the social issues or those kind of things. So thank you. So Ms. Maren, Bupsi, before you're giving a comment or question to the other presenters, there's a question to you. Disruption happens one. So how do you continue the sustainability of your advocacy?
So following COVID, we had this $25 million grant from central government for innovating streets. So it was to widen them for walking or add cycleways. And so because they knew I did parklets, I get Places for Good get subcontracted from the government to activate these areas using my method of parklets to garner community voice. So that's how I fund it. But because I'm very active on Instagram, so Instagram, Twitter, I share a lot Places for Good or Bupsi Moran, because I've traveled all over the world in many cities. And as people can't travel as much, that experience has become really helpful to other cities about what makes a place and how you get that sense of belonging. And so by everyone knowing that that's my specialty, I'm basically the parklet guru, especially in Auckland. I then get asked by local government and then I upskill. So I run parklet workshops for community engagement. So I teach local transport authorities participatory design projects, and because I also work in schools. So my funded projects are through central government, at which they pay me to upskill their in-house staff to engage with students and engage with the general public outside of their general practices, which are usually a table at the library or an online forum. I'm more about in the field, gathering data. I use Inhabit Place, which is based out of Canberra, and it's actually a software where you observe and you get pedestrian counts, you do surveys on the spot, questioning, and because we're in level 1, you're able to actually meet face to face while people are walking past a parklet and learn about how they use the spaces. And then for my work that I do for free to help community, I'll go into classrooms and schools. So as long as we keep building up. So on Friday, I'm meeting with Parliament in Wellington to meet 2 students from a high school that created a walkability map about safety in their neighborhood. So because they find me on Instagram or Twitter, I'm able to connect the younger generations to this skill of marrying public space to policy, because I think we're going to need more students that are capable of communicating to government on how they can have more public space or more safety. So I usually work with younger people where possible to sustain this energy throughout cities, if that answers the question.
You are very skillful for using the SNS and to connect with the young people. That's great. So Ms. Maren, do you have any comments or questions to the other presenters?
For Mr. Kinoshita, I was curious more about the ghost stories, because that sounds like a really cool placemaking activation. I was trying to take a photo of the slide and then it passed, but someone else mentioned the ghost stories, but I really would like to know a little bit more about that and how it went and if you were going to do it again.
Okay, it's a good question. Ghost story is the popular event in all the time when I was small. Mostly that's a big family, so that older generation, grandparents, or especially grandmother, told about such kind of story. Or sometimes community event after the ghost story to visit gravesite, grave of the temple. Yeah, such a place. It's a place, the feeling of that. That's good for kids. So such a Japanese summer is very hot, but such a ghost story make us sometimes feeling cold. Yeah, cooling our feeling. In the summer, such a traditional event. I don't know you have, but now such kind of event has disappeared. Therefore, to that ghost story for limited people and a nice place. And my old house that theater group So realize it's good to do that event, the dark and the spotlight, and the theater, the actors, and the good to tell the more atmosphere. That kind of thing we enjoyed. It's
Yeah,
okay.
we believe that the ghost story chill you down in the summer nights, so that's very popular. Sorry for interruption. Yeah, is that all?
Yeah, that was my question. And then I see that someone has a question for Daniela. So
I know that. Thank you.
Oh.
So there's a question to the Daniela, and in countries like India, our cities are highly dense and crowded. Would you advocate them for essential services to be available at less earlier? If we have to talk the aspect of crowding for COVID.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Actually, there was a photo. I don't know if you saw it on one of the central neighborhoods. And these photos were taken last year during pandemic time, in the lockdown. But in the reality, in these places, you didn't see that. Because they, even though we had restrictions in the city, in the informal settlements, you didn't see that happen because they had to sell things. They had to they live daily, so you didn't see this situation in these places. And the thing is that you see in those photos, it's true, it's overcrowded. How can you ask them to have the social distancing? So I think in this, to locate the neighborhood, to identify the neighborhood centralities, there was a map that there were some red lines. I think that it didn't show that clear, the red lines, but I think they should do some strategies in these places, such as, for example, these streets. Some of the streets become pedestrian in the time of crowding. So we saw that the overcrowding started from 8 until 11, and then again started at around 5 to 7 p.m. So maybe they should do pedestrian in this time of hours, so people can use the street and keep the distance, the social distance. About to have to serve, to be able to have a less radio, yes, I'm agree. The interesting part of this analysis was when we identify the neighborhood centralities, which are organic, right? Because it's an informal settlement, so these grow very organically. So when we start to check the radios, it was approximately to 400 to 500 radios that there was a centrality. I think, yes, it should be less, but in this moment, the radio is around 400 of each centrality we located. But I think there should be some strategies for this public space that is already overcrowded, like the pedestrian of the street, for example, and of course the improvement of the public space in these central neighborhoods.
So thank you. So Daniela, do you have any comments or questions to the other presenters?
Yes, to both of them. I have a question. During the pandemic time, what were the challenges you found for the community participation process?
Okay, yeah, that is important question to discuss at this session. Yeah, because now under COVID-19, so in Japan, many restrictions, over-restricted society, and they stay home. And the human relationships got cut and closed. how can, but there are some people who are thinking about this crisis. And also at this time, not only COVID-19, Japan is meeting climate crisis, disasters, flood, strong raining. So that so people also we are facing such difficulty, but the idea never give up to overcome this crisis. So some people thinking about through the network. If I got an idea to share, the people through the network, so agreed and connect to do, so motivate to do, and share the relationship could give me and I can give others such kind of braves to do, never give up, to challenge, and to seek for the future, such for sustainability as to the question. That motivation, and I mentioned such creative imagination for the people. It's very important. Based on my experience, to share the experience, we can do such kind of feeling to share is very important.
Thank you. Oopsie.
Oh, yes. Sorry, my battery. I think what I did for COVID was, I think us placemakers, and you could see from the presentations, is a lot of us worked harder during lockdown because we have that tenacity to keep going. And so for my work with council, a local Maori iwi asked for help, and I was sourcing all the funding because immediately, because we went in such a hard lockdown, people couldn't get to, people were scared to go get food. People, like in March, everything shut. So we did something, we delivered Easter eggs by car. So we delivered Easter eggs north, south, west, east. And I said, that's how we're going to capture the trust of the people, to know that you're there to support them. Because a lot of people were scared, especially New Zealand, because they're so far from the rest of the world and they're not sure how it was going to pan out back then. And so because we quickly started gaining the trust, because community participation is successful through trust that you will deliver, or that you have the best intentions for people and to support them through hard times, right? So we then were able to deliver food, kai. And so that's how we did it. So we just quickly, Maori, more studies are being done that during lockdown and COVID, that the Maori, the indigenous ways of gathering and working as a community, like Professor Kinoshita showed, that quickly you adapted and you were working with all your smaller networks and sharing those ideas. And even I'm in Placemaking X, which is a global network as well. We met in the, for me, it was 3 a.m. So this is the best conference I've been in the last 3 years, because most of the conferences are East Coast time and I'm meeting in the middle of the night. But I go to them because like moments like this, where we're sharing ways we can work together. Maori people do storytelling as well. So I love the ghost story idea. We're all here to work together more than I think we ever have before pre-COVID. I hate to say it, but I feel like I'm sharing ideas freely and back and forth because it's a pandemic and because we have a climate emergency, where maybe people were more careful with giving away their solutions. I think when it comes to community participation, my work during COVID with the Maori iwi was an example of quickly going north, south, west, east. How do we share and give as quickly as we can? If that answers the question, but that's what I thought of thinking of COVID.
Yeah, building trust is quite important, but it is very difficult to have new network, within a certain group of the network, and it might be easier even using the Zoom or whatever, but it's getting very difficult to expand the network to the other groups, the outreach things. But anyway, so as for the ghost story, there's some request from Ruiz, like, in the chat box, he seen is the references to the Japanese concept of the ghost story, and Japanese concept that ghost stories are occurring during summer. Professor Kinoshita, do you have any idea? it's a traditional belief that we have, because you get scared, you just chill you out. It just chill you out, So that's the thing. If Professor Kino say, if you have any reference to that, please send her using the chat box.
Links reference on the Japanese ghost story cooling. That I want to ask you that this is a very popular for us in Japan. Summertime ghost story make cooling. Don't you have such kind of custom or such traditional event or such a feeling? Ghost story, so scaring, the cooling. Yeah. No?
Somebody has any idea?
And that's scaring, and of course, summertime movie also such a horror movie very popular. So people like, or such kind of amusement center, such a horror theater, such kind. And so that the hot summertime, such as scaring and cooling. And then this is in Japan, in traditionally the story or traditional story. Yeah, so many kinds of story. And rakugo also, yeah, and the storytelling. That's very familiar or that's very popular for us. But now, so that the custom in the community disappeared. Yeah. So then, but as an event to do under this COVID-19 at this situation, we tried last year. That was very through the internet and so open and so get participants, and it was very unique, and many people even though limited, but by family and so on, and the friends, so they enjoyed and the place and the story.
Sorry, we are running out of time. So if you have a quick comment from Daniela or Boopsy, kind of like ghost castle or haunting mansion or those kind of things.
Bone chilling. I think what the word is, it makes you cold, but you get the chills. So that even though the translation might be like, I know a little Japanese, it's not a tatakai, but it's like chill, like a chill, like it's not cooling. It might be, gives me the chills. Your ghost story.
Chill.
If I go back and Google summer activities in Japan making you have the chills, maybe we could find some stories.
Okay, I'll look for and so share.
Chills, gives me the chills. But
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. There's a book, Kwaidan.
Oh, Kumi suggested us, like, there's a book, Kwaidan, by Rafka Johan. Oh, he is the one who used to live in the Meiji era period Japan. Yeah.
Last summer we did from the story of him. Yeah.
So is it really a summer? It's a summer tradition. This
summer tradition.
Fantastic. I love it.
Daniela, any comments? It's okay if you don't have the kind of things.
Well, I also will check this book. Thank you for the suggestion. It's Kwaidan. I will check that. And yes, I mean, there is like methodology for community participation could be ghost stories, and as also like everyone show this day, and there's plenty, the movie, to share a movie, and also stories from the past of the community, things that links the identity of the place.
Yes,
so
yes.
you could find stories, movies, or biographies, many things. You can apply many methodology. I don't think there is a recipe for community participation. That would depend on the case, but you can use these things to engage the community in the process of designing, or in the process of doing things for change the community. Yes, but I think when you start to do when you start to do a project that you can that everyone can see the results, then it's a starting point of that change in a community. I think that.
I just wanted to say, I think too, going into this new surge that everyone's having, I think consistency and regularity. So what we did in the midst of the lockdown, because we had an 8-week lockdown where no one was out in public unless you had a special form. We met every 2 weeks, same time, no matter what. And that builds that trust as a group that's then spreading it to smaller groups. And that would be my main rule, I think, with community participatory practices is dependability. Is right up there with trust, that you're going to follow through and you'll show up. And so like, we know these sessions will be at this time till mid-December, and that we're going to be sharing stories. That's a relief for me and something I look forward to now. But if we didn't have that consistency and regularity, we need those little things during pandemics. I think during these stressful times, it's very hard to find those moments. And I think ghost stories or a parklet popping up are those things where you're like, oh, I hope this, you become a trusted source of that kind of activity. I feel like Kinoshita must always have a party. That will be good times.
Yeah,
Okay,
consistency.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, consistency is quite important, and you have to be the one who is reliable to be a community leader. And so I have to conclude this session. And as a conclusion, here is my understanding. As for the placemaking, there are 3 aspects. One is physical, the other one is cultural, and the third one is social. And during the pandemic, social aspect was quite damaged and most affected by the pandemic. And so we tried to, cover up with the IT tools like Zoom we are using now for this conference. But those IT tools is not quite enough to cover up the social aspect. So we also use the physical aspect, like installing the parklet or having smaller gatherings regularly, or those kind of things. And it works in a way, but what we are missing is, how we can use the cultural aspect to cover up the social aspect. Like why we are talking about the ghost stories, and why we're interested in the ghost stories that much in this session. The ghost stories, like Daniela said, it's the cultural aspect, you can relate to, and you can share the values, and through these, traditional values or identity or whatever, So the cultural aspect is quite important during the pandemic. So unfortunately, like I said, pandemic is not still over. So it's kind of premature to talk about the after COVID-19 things for the community design. But anyway, we are slowly going back to the field with these things like the cultural stuff and physical stuff, how we can cover up the physical stuff and cultural stuff with the loss of the social aspect in the placemaking and community design. So in mind. So that's all. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the wonderful presentations, and thank you for the comments and questions to them. And there will be other presentations tomorrow as well. So please come back to the Zoom session if you're interested, and then at the same time tomorrow. And thank you very much. And I think you just simply leave this Zoom session, and I will conclude this breakout room. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.